And action. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Action Podcast. It is episode number 78. And today we have a slew of movies to review. Our first movie to review is Five Nights at Freddy's, which you can currently see streaming on Peacock, and it's also still in theaters. It's the number one movie in theaters right now. We also have Anatomy of a Fall, which was the Palme D'Or winner from the Cannes Film Festival. Third, we have Pain Hustlers, which you can see now on Netflix. Fourth, we have Freelance, which stars John Cena. Fifth, we have the Milli Vanilli documentary, which is on Paramount Plus. Sixth, we have After Death, which is a documentary out in theaters now. And lastly, we have Butcher's Crossing, a Western starring Nicolas Cage. So with that, we're going to jump to Pete, who's going to give us his review of Five Nights in Freddy's.
Five Nights at Freddy's is a movie that came out in theaters as well as on Peacock. You can catch that streaming now. This is directed by Emma Tammy and starring Josh Hutcherson from Hunger Games fame, who played PETA, who's very good in that. So the premise of Friday Night at Freddy's, and apparently it was a video game, which I'm not a gamer, so I had no idea that this was an existing IP. I thought that this was just a normal movie that somebody made up on their own. This is about Hutcherson, who is a security guard. He's down on his luck. He just can't catch a break. He's in debt. He's going to lose his sister. So he takes this job at almost like a Chuck E. Cheese type establishment. And, you know, his job is fairly simple. Just make sure people don't get in. But as things start to progress, we start to realize that the animatronic robots are actually alive. And then it continues on. Now, this movie got a 5.6 on IMDb, and that's fair because it's just not, no offense, it's just not a great movie, even a little bit. I would watch this on streaming. I wouldn't waste the time, unless, of course, you have the AMC pass where you can see up to 3 films a week. This is a tough watch in a way because it's just so silly. And usually with these kinds of movies, when, you know, you don't really have a lot of expectations, you go into them thinking, okay, this is fine. It's just going to be a good time. I just didn't find myself entertained at all throughout the whole thing. And I thought that the direction it went and the storytelling was really lazy, and yeah, just wasn't a great experience for me. It's what my gut said when I was going to see this movie. When I first saw the previews, like I remember the previews came on and just thinking to myself, what did I just watch? Like, that's getting funding, which is insane. So yeah, there you go. Friday Night at Freddy's. Check it out on Peacock. You should probably see it once, but that's about it.
So I had a very similar take to Pete. I think the most important thing about this film to understand is the demographics of this film. So like Pete mentioned, this is an IP property that is based off of a mobile video game that was super popular in like 2014, I believe. And so it's already got kind of a huge kind of audience, and a lot of people that want to see this. This is like a teenager movie, essentially. This is adults, I think, are going to kind of struggle a little bit with it. And this is a good kind of like, this is kind of like Gremlins, just not as good, if that makes sense. You know, how Gremlins is like, it's not really scary, but it's a little kind of terrifying, especially when you're younger. This is kind of like a new age Gremlins based off that IP. And again, the most impressive thing about this film is really how successful it has been. So this has made $92 million domestically and has made $152 million worldwide. And so, and this is a budget of roughly $20 million. So this is a huge, huge hit. And like I said, I think this is mainly more popular with teenagers versus adults. Now, as a movie, I think there's some things that are interesting in this film. I didn't know going into it was an IP property, but it is interesting. I wish I would have done a little more research before I went in. But without even throwing that aside, this film has some elements that make it very interesting, but also I think there's just some elements that make it come up short. And I think that's where ultimately I think this movie lacks. The story at the end of the day is just a little lacking. There's too many like, wait, what? Like things just don't connect very well. And I think the premise is pretty interesting. And I think, this kid dealing with, other missing kids and stuff like that. I like the setup of that, but I just don't think it was 100% executed. I don't think the script was 100% ready when they decided to shoot. And that's just my honest opinion. I still thought it was entertaining, but it's one of those entertaining, but also kind of lackluster. And so, definitely, if you have kids, I would say teenagers more specifically, I think I would recommend it. Every teenager I know has really liked it. So it's really just as an adult, can you stomach it? And again, I think it was entertaining. I wasn't mad I watched it, but at the same time, it was like, yeah, that didn't make any sense. So take that as you will. The next film is Anatomy of a Fall. And like I mentioned, this is the Palme d'Or winner from Cannes Film Festival. And so I was super excited to see it. This is a French film, but it's ultimately in English, though there's a couple subtitles when they speak, but it goes kind of back and forth between English and French and even some German, I believe. But ultimately, this is a kind of like a murder mystery, if you will, but done in almost a documentary style, like very raw, and you don't even feel like you're watching a film sometimes. It's just like it's almost like they just put the camera there and the actors are going, and you don't really realize you're watching a movie. But I thought this was really well done. I could see why this won the Palme d'Or, and I found it again super entertaining, but just compelling as well. And the courtroom scenes are really well done. And again, just the essence of this film is just so raw and natural. It's really really impressive to watch. And I think that's again this movie is just so authentic in that way. So I highly recommend it. If you can find it still out in theaters, check it out. If not, wait for it on streaming. But I think it's the only issue is 2.5 hours long, but I thought it held up pretty well in terms of time. So third, Pain Hustlers. Pete's going to give his review.
Pain Hustlers, that you can see on Netflix right now, is a movie directed by David Yates, who you would know from a lot of the Harry Potter movies, including the Fantastic Beasts. I believe starting with Half-Blood Prince and then moving forward. He's an established director, very good director, and this stars Emily Blunt and Chris Evans. This is the story of Emily Blunt's character, who is, just like my last review, a down on her luck mother who is struggling to make it every single day, but has just this certain something special inside of her. And she meets Chris Evans, who plays a really funny, weird character. And so he decides to take a chance on her and give her an opportunity to help get pharmaceuticals prescribed, basically. And she's so good at her job, and she ends up saving the company. They become like these just insane millionaires. But then, of course, they weren't really doing things according to the law. And so there's some issues of brewing. This is very much like a sort of like a Wolf of Wall Street, not obviously that caliber, but this is like a Wolf of Wall Street style, but in the pharmaceutical world. I enjoyed this movie thoroughly. I had a great time. There were moments of comedy. And I think that the real shining star of this is Emily Blunt. I mean, she has a range of emotions throughout this film. And you really do feel everything that she's sort of experiencing. And I thought this was probably one of her better performances. Chris Evans is funny, and that's cool. He did a good job, but I think that role could have gone to anybody, really. Andy Garcia is in this as well as Catherine O'Hara, who's very good as the mom. Um, Definitely go check out this film. It's on Netflix, so it's super easy to find. This was my number one movie of this past week, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have.
So I probably wasn't as high on it as Pete was. I thought this movie was solid. I think it's definitely a good streaming film. Um, Pete kind of mentioned the comp Wolf of Wall Street. I think this is definitely the poor man's Wolf of Wall Street. I probably don't like this as much as it's based on a true story, which I think adds to the appeal of this film. But I think like I don't think it's as good as Dumb Money, so I'd put it just below that. Definitely not Get Short, The Big Short or Wolf of Wall Street. Those are true life stories about the financial world, and I thought those are like the home runs. I thought Dumb Money was probably like a double, and this is like a single. Like I said, I didn't. I enjoyed watching it. I don't know if I'll watch it again. But solid film. I do believe Emily Blunt, like you mentioned, was a great act. She did a phenomenal job on this. However, you could make a case that she's almost like too good of an actor because she's supposed to be kind of like this Floridian Florida woman, and she's almost like too good looking and too polished because like when she really puts herself together, it's just like she looks too good. You know what I mean? So um that would be like my only critique, again, nitpicking, but again, it's not about her. I think she was fantastic. Definitely different type of role for her, but Chris Evans, I liked him in this, but kind of the same thing. They're both two very good looking people, and I think this movie almost didn't need these two high hitting stars and two good looking people. They needed more regular people. So just something to think about. But ultimately, I'd say check it out. Again, it's on Netflix, and do that. Next is Freelance, and that's in theaters now. This movie is uh, this movie it has not been doing that well in the box office. It only grossed $2.8 million, so that cannot have been a success in that round. 5.5 on IMDb. Um, I think this movie struggled with tonality. Was it a comedy? Is this a was this a drama, an action drama? I think this kind of didn't really straddle the line very well. This had a budget of $40 million, by the way, and only made less than 4. So this is not going to be a success in that realm. I think those other two ratings are pretty accurate. I think this movie just is missing a little something. Cohesion. I think it's missing maybe the connection between a writer and a director, where it's just like there's some elements to this movie that work, and then there's just some elements that just leave it like wanting more. I think everything needed to be kind of ratcheted up a little bit. I like John Cena in it. Again, I didn't hate this movie by any stretch of the imagination. It was kind of like I said, a fun movie, but I think this movie I really liked the third character. He was the president, and played by Juan Pablo Raba, and he was pretty funny. But I think this movie really needed a third, and even a fourth and a fifth person that really, again, this movie probably needed more humor, and it needed another or two character that was really, really funny. I think between John Cena, Christian Slater, and Alison Brie, there just wasn't enough humor between all of them. Again, not saying their acting was bad. That's not what I'm saying. But again, I think in order for this movie to work, I think it needs to be funnier. And between those four, they're not known to be real comedic actors and actresses. So I think that, just like I said, you need to kind of find that right. That's casting, right? I think you need to find that right flow. So see that kind of at your own discretion. Next, we have the Milli Vanilli documentary. Pete, give your thoughts.
So the new Milli Vanilli documentary that just came out on Paramount Plus exclusively is a documentary about the pop band from the 90s, Milli Vanilli. A lot of you out there aren't as old as I am, but Milli Vanilli was huge. This was one of the biggest bands in the 90s. And it was also the source of the biggest controversy. I remember as a kid, this was the first time I had experienced controversy within the music industry, and like, oh my gosh, things aren't as they seem. This movie is very well crafted, and listening to all the music again is just very nostalgic, as well as the personal lives between Rob and Fab, their relationship and how things grew, the relationship between the producer, who basically created and invented Milli Vanilli, and the turmoil that came from these two guys who were great dancers and great artists. They just weren't great singers. The ability to take this sort of project and create something so magical. It's almost like they were sort of the first people ever to get just destroyed by something that everyone sort of kind of does to one degree or another in pop music, especially. Like, there's not a lot of instances where you're just hearing the normal vocals, the original vocals of a singer, or lip syncing instead of doing a live show. I mean, we've seen it a million times. However, these were the first ones to really sort of do it and actually have recognition. And that recognition was the absolute top of popularity. They were huge. This was a great movie, 7.6 on IMDb. If you have Paramount Plus, I would go and see this documentary immediately. This is by far one of the best documentaries I've seen all year, and it might just be because of the nostalgia. I don't know, but it was really well done.
Yeah, so I actually was part of the interview. We interviewed Fab Morvan a couple years ago on Valuetainment, and so I've already met the guy, and I got to hear a lot of this story. And so I was kind of looking forward to seeing it in a more, put together way. And ultimately, I thought this was really, really well done. A little bit even more details than what we were given in just the interview with Fab. And I really enjoyed it. Again, I've always been a kind of a big fan of them. I remember growing up with them and loving them, and me and Pete would do the dances. And I still like the music today. And so, I'm definitely glad that Fab is able to kind of turn his life around. And I just thought they did a good job overall with it. I highly recommend it if you're familiar with Milli Vanilli. Even if you've never heard of Milli Vanilli before, but you're a music fan, I would say check this out, because I think this is a great story about the music industry and how especially like pop bands work. So, whether it's your BTS or, there's just ways that this stuff happens, and it's not always like, hey, we all grew up together and we're best friends. Like, that's just not how it's done. And so again, very interesting tale. I highly recommend that one. Next, we have After Dark, which is another documentary, and this I saw in theaters. And this tells a few different people's story of when they basically pass away for a period of time and they come back to life. And so they tell their stories. And if you're interested in that subject matter, I highly recommend it. I thought the film was well done. This is not necessarily a pure like religious film. I know that's probably some people's hesitation. But if you are religious, I would also say definitely see this. If you're not, but you're still curious about death, I think this is also a good film. But I thoroughly enjoyed the subject matter and just hearing people's story and them discussing about it. And then you can kind of make your own judgments on the subject matter. But ultimately, I still thought, again, it was well done and it was interesting. So, and lastly, we have Butcher's Crossing, which stars Nicolas Cage. And this is a Western film that is basically, this is about an Ivy League dropout that travels to the Colorado wilderness, where he joins a team of buffalo hunters on a journey that puts his life and sanity at risk. And so this is this is basically like, you know how in Dance with Wolves they go on that buffalo hunt. Well, imagine like that's the entire kind of premise of the movie, and it goes a little bit more in depth on how important the buffalo are. And oh, before I even go this, I know a lot of people don't even know this, but there is no actual buffalo in America. There are actually bison. They quote unquote call it the American buffalo now, but it's not actual buffalo. So I'm going to keep saying buffalo because that's what the movie says. And back then they thought it was buffalo, but for the scientific people, it is bison. Okay. Which you can also buy at your local marts now. But this was a very solid Western. I'm a big Western guy, and I thought this was really, really well done. I don't think this was a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought the subject matter was interesting enough. I thought Nicolas Cage actually was pretty solid in this role, and it was just entertaining, and it was very believable in terms of like Buffalo and all that stuff, because sometimes that can be like really bad CGI or stuff like that. But I thought this worked. It was well shot. I thought it was pretty well directed as well. Just again, this is my kind of cup of tea. Just a nice, solid, good Western, like they always used to make, back in the 50s and 60s. This is, to me, is just a throwback. This is one of the better Westerns I've seen in the last 10 years. And if you're a Western guy, I highly recommend it. Or even that subject matter, if you're interested in kind of historical stuff, this is again more about the buffalo trade and those that would go and hunt it for money and livelihood. So check it out. It might be in select theaters, but it should be on streaming also coming up. So definitely check it out when you get a chance. So with that, everyone, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Next week there is no real big releases. I know there's Priscilla, which is about Priscilla and Elvis meeting and married in that relationship. There's also a couple streaming films, and then ultimately leading up to the Marvels, which will probably be the next big one that we review. So stay tuned. There's a lot of there's also The Killer coming out. David Fincher's The Killer, and so we'll be reviewing that as well. So make sure everybody check these out. We appreciate your love and support. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and we appreciate you. And with that, that is a cut. Thanks, guys.